Hi, I'm Corey Wayne, and I've got a really interesting article and statistics that have shown up. This is from a New York Post article, and what's so shocking about it is it says that 34% of Americans say violence against the government is justified. And so that's really it's interesting, but when you go back and you pull up the actual stats going back over basically the last 20 years, is that in 2015 only 23% of Americans approved of violence against the government, and 5 years before that it was only 16% agreed, and then in the mid 90s it was about 13%. So you have almost like a tripling of the American public are saying that violence against the government is justified. And so then you wonder, like, what's the cause of that? What's causing people to, because at the end of the day, if you're rebelling, I guess, against the government, you are viewing the government as having become tyrannical. In other words, the government is overstepping their bounds on running and regulating and trying to regulate in every aspect of our lives. And so when they break it down into the percentages, is that they says 40% of Republicans agreed it could sometimes be quote, justified for citizens to take violent action against the government. 23% of Democrats say that, and then 41% of independents also endorsed situational violence. That is just, I mean, when you look at everything that's been going on in the last couple of years, it's understandable why those figures have basically in the last 20 years have tripled. Or 20, I'd say 25 years when you go back to the mid 90s when it was only 13%.
From the article, I've seen a couple of bullet points, and there was one bullet point that was interesting also. Of those who agree that rising up in arms against the government could be acceptable, 22% said it would be justified for invasions of personal liberties, while 15% pointed to a military takeover or democratic collapse. 3% said violence was appropriate if the government did not accept election results.
So it wasn't, it's only 3% talking about election results. It's obviously that people overall are feeling that their liberties are being infringed. I don't know, me personally, I'm not a fan of being told I got to wear a mask. And thank God I live in the free state of Florida. But I mean, it's just so amazing how, like, one of the guys I follow on Twitter, and this was about a year and a half ago, he was saying with everything going on with the lockdowns and the vaccine mandates and all this stuff, that's the fastest roll up of power in history. And it's not just here in the United States, it's literally happening all over the world, especially in Europe. Like we talked about in a previous article, I mean, every weekend, which you never hear mention of this in the media because they're lying by omission as usual, there's literally hundreds of thousands of people all over Europe protesting against the forced vaccine mandates and lockdowns and people not being allowed to eat in restaurants and basically continue on with their life, because what they had said initially was once you get the vaccine, then you can go back to normal. And well, when everybody got their vaccines, and they said, well, the efficacy drops over time, so you need booster shots. And so you got booster shots, and now they're saying, they're even mixing different, like the Pfizer and the Moderna, mixing different vaccines to try to get the efficacy to, or their immunity, I guess, or their immune response to last longer. And so the politicians promise, hey, things will go back to normal as soon as you get vaccinated. Well, when you look at some of these countries, some of them have like 80, 90% of their population been vaccinated, and yet lockdowns are still happening. Nothing has changed.
Well, it's interesting with the power thing as well, too. You saw the roll up of the power. It's also been the greatest wealth transfer in the history of the world has happened as well during this whole thing. So it's Very, very. It's all just kind of getting centralized and into one like kind of central big.
Well, the big companies were allowed to stay open.
Yeah, you
You
weren't
know, the
allowed to go to
Walmarts,
church.
the
You can't do
Targets
stuff.
of the world, but the little mom and pop businesses, it's like, and restaurants have just absolutely gotten crushed. I mean, millions and millions of people have had their lives and their livelihoods just destroyed. I know one of the other girls that we work with. I mean, she's been here for 3 months because she left Michigan, and what she was saying is just like where she lives, like most of the restaurants have all gone out of business because of the lockdowns and the restrictions, and the government forced you to close in the interest of saving lives, but they didn't write any checks. They didn't
Yeah.
pay these people for their businesses and their livelihoods. That
On
got
top of
destroyed.
that, wages go up or have gone up as well, and the price of food has gone up. So it's basically impossible for restaurants now to survive because they're not getting the same customer base, and they can't get the food on the same price, and the workers are more expensive. It
Well, if
makes so much sense why all the restaurants are closed and they won't open up again.
why would you want to work for $8 or $10 an hour when you can make $15 an hour on, what is it, 500-600 bucks a week? I think is what the unemployment was. Like, so these people were getting paid more to stay at home and do nothing. So, I mean, enlightened self-interest is like, that makes sense. It's like, why go back to work when you're actually getting paid to do less? And so, in order for the businesses that need workers to find people, they're having to pay a lot more. So therefore, everything across the board has gotten more expensive because labor has gotten more expensive.